What does success look like to me? What am I driving towards? And those things are very personal. It's amazing what you can accomplish when there's trust in the room. And when you remove that trust, it's remarkable how inefficient you can become.
And when you've got guys around you who are buying into your vision and pushing towards the same thing, it's energizing. Welcome to the Forge Contractor Alliance podcast. My name is Josh. I'm here with my good friend and mentor, Kenton. And we're here to talk about real life, business, and growing into the future. So thanks for joining us.
So hey guys, thanks for tuning in. And we're looking at a topic that I think we kind of need to start this podcast off with, and that is humility and pride and what that looks like. And I think that full disclosure, this is like our sixth shot at starting this podcast, and I think this is the one that's actually going to go live. And the rationale behind that is that we are trying to find the tone that makes sense with how we want to engage with our audience. And it's really important to us because here's the thing, is that we're normal guys. We work with our hands, we have families, we have kids, we are involved in our community, and life to us is multifaceted. And in some of these areas, we're experts, but in most of them, we're literally not. And so the issue that we've been having is that the early recordings that we've done, we've gone back and listened to them, and we're like, you know what? We sound like we know more than we do. And we don't want to come across that way, honestly. Like, we want to come across at a place like we're in this together. And I kind of think of, there was an old comedian, Red Green, who he always end his program, he'd always say, hey, we're in this together. Like, all our families are crazy, we're in this together. And I don't want to be demeaning. I think our families can be amazing. However, we are in life together. The stuff that we do, sometimes we find we have a knack for something, we have a special ability, and we're able to become an expert in a certain area. But for the most part, I think we figure out as we go.
Yeah. A big part of what this podcast, or the dream of this podcast is that we're doing life together. And in many ways, we're figuring it out as we go. And that includes our businesses and our families and our marriages. And so, yeah, this is really designed to be a place where we can come together as a community and learn and grow together.
And I think that what that means is that we don't want to apologize for our opinions. And so I come from an old, like a Mennonite background, but I think that in the Mennonite world, and I'm generalizing now, but it's my own world, so I think I can do this, is that we tend to have, if we err on the side of pride and humility, we tend to err on the side of false humility. Like, if we're good at something, we tend to underplay that. We naturally tend to undersell. We don't always over-deliver, but we naturally tend to undersell as a rule. And I think that that's kind of my heritage. Is like, I'm a hard worker. I'll let my work speak for itself. But the issue there is that there are some things that we've really tried in the fire. Like, there's some things that we've done, and we've done it over and over again, and we can become pretty knowledgeable in certain areas. So I guess my point is that there's times when you might feel like, wow, that sounds pretty authoritative, or like you're not giving a lot of room for discussion around that. There are areas like that. And so if we lean into those areas, it's like, okay, cool. But for the most part, it's like, this is what's worked for us or hasn't worked for us in our lives.
Yeah.
And we want to be pretty transparent about that, because the struggle is real. The challenges are real, and we're not where we hope we will be one day.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about our early days in business, and actually I've been doing quite a bit of thinking around that leading up to this. And so I was raised in various places around the world, and I got a lot of experience, talked to a lot of people from a lot of different places. When I turned 18, I moved from Southern Europe, where my parents were living, back to Canada. And my intention was to start a business as soon as I could. And so I went and I did a informal apprenticeship with an old tradesman down in the Lower Mainland in BC, and worked really hard for a year with him. And once I'd spent the year, I pretty much packed up my stuff and moved north to Prince George, to the place where I kind of had spent some time as a teenager, and just literally found a name, called myself Sunnyside Roofing, and started doing business at the age of 19. And in fairness, I looked like I was 16, so it was a bit of a stretch.
I can relate to that.
And I think that my entire schooling in business was really trial and error. And I think there's something super authentic about that. There's something really meaningful, but it's also, man, you get bruised up. Like I didn't have a mentor. And so I had mentors in life, but not in business. And so it was, and my parents were definitely not business oriented people. So I came at it pretty fresh and green. And I just think back to like not just making mistakes, but making the same mistakes repeatedly. Like, yeah.
So going into that, what gave you a passion and a desire to try and do business despite not having anyone in your network who had done it previously?
I loved the freedom around small business. I really deeply loved the idea of being able to wake up in the morning and kind of self-direct my day. And the idea for me, and again, and I think this will resonate with most of the people listening to this, I mean, we're directed towards contractors, but if you're a physician or a pilot, you know, or an engineer that this resonates with you, like, welcome along. Like we don't want to be exclusively for contractors, but we are speaking as contractors to contractors because that's just our background.
Yep.
But I just love the idea of not being a cog in a huge wheel. I just had this desire. I had a deep desire to be like a big fish in a little pond versus a little fish in a big pond. And I'm not exactly sure why. I think the freedom associated it was something, and just the thought of not having a ceiling. Like when you're in small business, nobody tells you like, this is what success looks like. It's more of a self-determined thing. It's like, what does success look like to me? What am I driving towards? And those things are very personal.
Yeah. The ceiling thing I can relate to, because that, to me, the real benefit to doing business was the ability to not have other people hindering my development and growth. And then it actually translated later down the road where I actually got to grow something outside of myself.
Right.
Like an incorporated business, you get to, like, it's a part of you, you can found it, but you're actually growing something that's bigger than yourself.
Sure.
Which is super appealing to me.
Which is an evolution that some people go through and some people don't.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think that this is the thing that we want to be super aware of, is that there's a lot of information out there that's business oriented, that's very growth oriented. And we seriously believe in growth, but the most important growth, at least for me, and Josh, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, but for me, the most important growth is personal growth, not just in myself, but in the people that I'm working with. That's more important to me than business growth. And so we want to be careful to not equate success in your life or success in what we're doing as just strictly growth on a commercial scale or growth in a business sense, but that if we are growing in that way, it's coming out of a personal growth, and it's not the other way around where, you know, the corporate growth or our business growth is where we find our identity, I guess.
Yeah. Well, to me, that's the beauty of business, is, especially when you're running a business, is, and there's the old saying, your business will only grow as much as you do. So being an entrepreneur is this beautiful balance of growing yourself to be a leader and to grow your business, because your business will only grow as much as you do, but you still have to be intentional about growing the business itself, growing the people in your business, creating opportunity, creating vision. It's this constant day-to-day balance of self-growth and growing your business.
And I think that that the challenge that we have as contractors often is that being good at what we do, like that, the nuts and bolts part of what we do, being good at that can often be the priority, especially when you're starting out. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And I think that that's also partially why starting a company when you're young, there's a certain amount of almost natural protection around that, because you actually don't know anything, and people that are dealing with you can recognize that. They're like, anything that you do know comes as a surprise. I can remember, was one of my earliest calls, and I remember going to the door and, you know, parking my old $200 truck that I had bought at an auction. It was like an old piece of work. And big blue truck, leaked oil, so I had to park on the road rather than on someone's driveway because I would offend them before I even talked to them. But I can remember talking to this lady, comes to the door and she looks at me and she goes, "You're Kenton?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And immediately, without thinking, she's like, "Are you old enough to do this?" And I'm like, what I'm doing is the young man's job. I'm like, the question is, am I young enough? And yeah, absolutely, I'm young enough. And I felt clever, but and I did get the job. But the thing is, there's a certain amount of, like, you can only know so much when you're young. And so there's a certain natural humility that comes with just being a young businessman. Like, you know that you don't, and if you think that you know it all, well, that's a problem and you probably won't last very long. And so I recognized that I didn't know it all. At the same time, I would argue that I was probably cockier than I should have been. You know, like, I think that I had a certain bravado. Like, I really, truly believed that I could do my job and I could do it well. And despite the fact that I knew very little.
Yeah. But I think one of the main things in those early phases of starting a business, like, let's be realistic. You want to go through a phase of personal growth, start your first business.
Yeah.
Like, you have no choice because you're going through the school of hard knocks right out the gate. You got to learn all the hats, because when you're starting out a business, like, you have to know how to do at least a small element of everything. And that includes things you've never experienced. That includes things that you're not good at.
Yeah.
And the most challenging part of my life was the first time I started a business. So much so that 18 months later, that business went bankrupt.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I didn't care or I wasn't trying. It was just because the demand to grow in a very broad spectrum I didn't grasp.
Yeah.
I wanted to grow in the things I was only good at and the things I knew.
Sure.
And because I didn't pay attention to the accounting, the administration, the sales side of things,
the cash
so
flow.
much. Yeah, the cash flow.
Sure.
Next, it doesn't matter how hard I worked and how good I was as a roofer. That business failed because, in all reality, I didn't grow as an individual enough to meet the demand that company needed.
That's interesting. What age were you at that time?
I think 19.
Yeah, I think very close to the
19,
same age.
yeah.
And I mean, we're almost a generation different in age. I'm the old guy here for sure. But we both started running our own shows at a really young age.
Yeah. Even earlier when you were talking about that conversation with the customer where they're like, "Are you old enough to do this?"
Yeah.
I vividly remember customers looking at me and saying that same thing. And I was like, "Oh, trust me, I'm good at what I do."
Yeah.
And it was actually naive looking back at it, because I'm like, I remember saying that with the utmost amount of confidence, yet 18 months later, that company crashed and burned. So did they have a good roof? Probably.
Yeah.
And I tried hard and tried to bring a good service, sure. But did I know what I was doing as a businessman and have the experience to do that? Not at all. So
and I think this is kind of the posture that we have as small business people. It's kind of like becoming a dad. Only becoming a dad grows you even faster and harder, in my opinion. But it's kind of the same type of steps where you jump into something, or in the case of becoming a dad, that thing almost feels like it happens to you organically, like this, here you are. And now you've got to react to that. Yeah. And if you come at it without any confidence, and sometimes that ego almost looks like pride, you know, you've got to believe that you can do it. And so there's this piece of like bravado, and it's not always real. Like, sometimes it's almost bluster, because you just don't want to be that guy that shrinks away from a challenge, that says, well, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. But your skill set's actually really low. Like everyone says, you know, your first kid, man, God bless them, because there's a lot of experimenting you're doing. There's a lot of like believing that you can do the right thing for this kid, but second guessing. There's a lot of behind the scenes, like, questioning. There's those conversations with God, like, really, am I built for this? And I think in business, it's the same way. It's like, when you go out and price that job, when that person answers the door and you're standing there, you feel somewhat exposed. You're like, okay, well, this is real. And I'm offering something, and I'm making a promise to someone that I can do something for them. And I believe I can do it. And I trust I can do it. But like in our case, it's as simple as, if you don't watch the weather And if you're not aware of a storm coming over the hill that's right beside you, you can literally like ruin someone's home, ruin your reputation, and destroy your dreams in like one afternoon.
One day. That's
like,
all it takes.
Literally. And we've seen it happen to competitors. Sadly, I've not gloated over this because it is, it's like the thought of it is just devastating. And it literally can happen where in one afternoon, like, yes, you might have liability insurance. Yes, you might have the coverages that you need in order to financially weather a mistake like that. And it's not even exactly a mistake. It is a mistake, but it's not exactly that. It's like a circumstance that overcomes you in a sense.
Yeah.
And you potentially aren't prepared for it. And so you can ruin things in a hurry by not knowing what you're doing or how to deal with those things that come along. And so there's a growth curve that has to happen just for survival.
Yeah.
And there's a posture that has to happen. But part of that is to go in with a mentality of like, I'm not exactly sure how this is going to play out, and hopefully I can put a few checks and balances in place early to protect the very vulnerable parts of what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think going back to even the parenting concept you were talking about, your business is almost like your child.
Yeah.
And I compare, because Ridgeline, which is my roofing company I own here in British Columbia, it's my second company.
Right.
And much like parenting, my first child, I wouldn't call regrets, but I handled my second child very differently.
Sure.
And even though my first company went under, took time, went and worked for a few other reputable people.
Yeah.
Decided to give it another go.
Yeah.
And through the failures and learning experiences of that first company, when I started Ridgeline, the company I'm currently running, man, the first few years were amazing. Totally different. Totally figured it out. And as long as I was still to the similar scale as I was with that first company,
right,
where I learned all those lessons,
yeah,
it went freakishly well, actually.
Yeah.
Like freakishly well. Our growth curve was like this.
Yeah.
But as soon as I exceeded the point that I had with that first company and I hit unfamiliar territory, then it started to go like this again, because I was like, oh man, it isn't just as simple as figuring out these few steps. I figured out the systems to run a small business, but when the small business, I wanted to grow it into a big business.
Yeah.
Like Ridgeline's been around 10 years and it's probably had 2 seasons now where we barely made it through. Barely. And those were both in times of growth.
Yes.
Where I was trying to significantly expand, significantly grow my team, get into certain areas. Again.
And serious growth. Like both of those places where you were pushing hard to break into an area or a level that you'd never been close to, really.
Yeah, different industries, different markets.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like, thank God we actually got through those years, because again, we've learned from those things and now we're taking those experiences and we're moving forward. Yeah. But there is nothing easy about growing a business, no matter what phase you're in, even in the small side of things to growing to a large business. And I eventually want I want Ridgeline to be more of a franchise type corporation. Yeah. And man, I'm very much prepared for areas of failure, areas where we're gonna screw up, we're gonna try again, and that's part of what you got to do when you're building a business.
Well, and I think that there is a place at which you hit that level of confidence, but I would also say that level of competence. Like you developed a certain competence in your failure, the initial failure that you had in business. You were, despite the eventual failure of that company, you were developing competencies along the way. Yeah. You were figuring things out, and you were pushing hard against things you didn't know. Like you were, and so there's this, and I think it's interesting because I feel like we have this God-given bravado inside of us that, if not destroyed in us as a young person, and in fairness, and I want to be sensitive to this, is that not all of us were parented well. And even, Josh and myself, our upbringings as kids was very different. Yeah. And so different strengths and weaknesses in our parents. And I think that's not like, that's not a judgment. It's just a fact that we all come from different parenting situations. I have a lot to be thankful for, And there's some things that I had to learn as an adult because I didn't learn them as a kid for whatever reason. And I think that's the same thing with our kids. They're going to say the same thing. They're going to be like, yeah, my parents were super strong in this area. This area, yeah, I was kind of flapping in the wind. And so that's fair. But I think that when we are pushing hard against the things that we don't know and eventually we fail, there's a day of reckoning. Like there's a day of reckoning to say, okay, now what? And I think in the entrepreneurial world, in the entrepreneurial world, especially in the small business world, failure is always an option. Like it literally is always an option. Like you can have the most brilliant company running, and then you can take it from brilliant to destroyed within a year or two without making many major mistakes. Like just pivoting your course a bit, taking on something that might be a bit too much, or losing confidence. Like you can have, and let's be honest here. And we've had this happen. You can have a customer who, for whatever reason, doesn't trust you. And that lack of trust in you somehow resonates so deeply that it starts to erode something inside of you that might have been okay. But all of a sudden you're doing this project and this person is treating you with a lack of trust, which is a horrible feeling. And all of a sudden, if you internalize that to a certain degree and forget who you are, you can start to operate in a place in the lack of confidence. And often with a customer that doesn't trust you, there can be challenges with payment. And I've seen many companies that were on like a seriously good trajectory all of a sudden just come off the rails because one or two key customers stopped trusting them, didn't pay them, and their response was poor. They didn't know how to navigate that. And all of a sudden the company is no more. And so this is real. Like this is real stuff. I don't think that this is something that we can say, well, I'm immune to that. No, I don't think so. I can remember, like, I'll give you a circumstance. I was probably, and I'm not sure actually this is a story that you've ever heard, maybe, but I was probably around 2021. I can remember, working for this customer. It was a pretty intense job. It was pushing us to the edge of our competency in our trade. It was an A-frame cabin. It tied into a flat roof. There were some complexities around it. And also logistically, the way that we attacked the job for efficiency's sake was demanding. And also on that job, just to make a point, is that my brother was working with me at the time. And then we had another young friend that was an employee of ours. And my brother was my employee, but he worked like a business partner. And not built for roofing. He's a really big man, 6'4", and a very large man, which is hard up on heights when you're jumping around and stuff. And I remember on that particular job, he was standing on a jack, and our safety record was excellent at that time and still remains excellent to this day. Like I've worked decades in a very dangerous trade, and I still have all my capacity, which is I'm very grateful for. And so we pay a lot of attention to safety. It's a really big deal to us. That's something that we started early on. Keep a clean site, know what you're doing, like work with reliable equipment, etc. That particular day on that job, it was a very steep A-frame. He was standing on a jack and the jack just snapped. And I remember like the wood he was standing on, just like there was a knot in the board and we just didn't recognize it. We were using 2x4s back then, not 2x6. It was just but a good solid 2x4 was adequate. But on this pitch with his weight and the knot in the board, it snapped. And it wasn't something that we imagined would be like, if a board snapped, it would be like gradual. It was like he was there and then he was just gone. And I remember, and thankfully there was the low pitched roof below him. So he scraped himself up, but he was perfectly fine. Massive lesson for us on the safety side. We're like, okay, that's not happening again. But anyways, this job, so my point is it was pushing us to our competency. It was pushing us in the area of safety. It was pushing us on our system of what we were doing. But we were doing a good job. I assure you, we were doing a great job. That said, this customer just didn't trust us for whatever reason, just didn't trust us. And so I had these awkward conversations. They had paid us, but not fully. And there was a chunk of it that they just wanted to hold back for a couple, I think through the winter, just to make sure that it lasted, which is not normal.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's not normal. And it wasn't something that we had said, this is how the payment structure works. It's like when we're done the job, we receive payment. They said, okay, fine, but we're going to hold back, I think it was like 10% until the spring. And they were advised to do this, I guess. They were just naturally untrusting people. But I didn't know this, and I just saw it as a personal affront. And I remember the following spring, there was an issue on the roof, and did not have anything to do with how we installed it. It was just a flat out issue with the product, and it is what it is. And so and interestingly, often things compound when something goes a little bit sideways. There can often be I didn't have a product failure until this point. So I went to the manager at my material supply shop, and I'm like, hey, he's a great elderly gentleman. And I'm like, can you come out and take a look at this and help me resolve this? So he came out and he looked at it. He's like, yeah, you've got an issue. But I said, here's my bigger issue is that I'm not fully paid for this job, and they're looking for warranty work, which is legit, but I feel like it's really hard to warranty something that I'm not paid for. And he's like, yeah, you shouldn't. And I'm like, okay. And then he gave me a lesson that day. He says, look, this particular customer has a chip on their shoulder, and it's a chip against the world, and you just happen to step into their world. So he said, you're not going to solve that. Stand to your guns. I will back you up. And he was running a big shop, so he knew he had posture. He said, I'll back you up, and once they pay, go and fix it. We'll support you. And so these kind of learning curves, my confidence was shaken for a bit. My response was really poor. I was confrontational, and I'm not good at that kind of confrontation. I did a poor job of it. I did a poor job handling it. Once he backed me up, I was able to regain my posture, and in pretty short order, develop that kind of confidence. And in the long run, super beneficial to me because it takes the edge off the cockiness and puts it back in a place of more confidence, but coupled with a type of humility that is functional for learning versus thinking, well, I've got this.
Yeah. You did tell me parts of that story, not the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember the story about your brother snapping, snapping a 2x4 because, things can happen. I do think how we posture ourselves in our market, even how we are approaching this podcast, coming from a place of knowing everything and having confidence is one thing, but you also have to have the humility to recognize that you don't know everything, and even if you do know to do something well, there's probably somebody out there who knows how to do it better.
Totally. Absolutely. So, which can be really frustrating at times because sometimes, we are in a fairly small market. Our town is 100,000, we serve around 100,000 people ish. And so it's a relatively small market. And so Josh's company right now has by far the majority of the market share in his particular area in residential roofing. He's the large dog here. I run a niche company that has, again, I'm the main guy in my niche. It's very niche, but it's still so we can very easily feel like we've got it together and that we know what we're doing. And we do to a certain extent. We've gone through the school of hard knocks and we've learned a lot of stuff along the way. But every once in a while, I'll see someone even locally who I don't even know who it is will be done a job in my niche, and whether they're out of town or not, I don't know, because I'll all of a sudden go by a job and look at it and look at the detail and be like, wait a second, that's better than what I do. Who is this person? And how am I not how have I not seen whatever they're doing better than me? And so you get humbled, or you go to a bigger market and you see guys banging out work regularly. Yeah. It's just so amazing.
Yeah. Beautiful work too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to think that the world will be a worse place when we're gone, is a little bit egotistical. I hope, hopefully we have a good impact on the people around us while we're here. But the truth is most of what we bring to the table is reproducible if someone cares. Yeah. And so there's a certain humility attached to that. The flip side of that is we need to care. Yeah. And we need to grow, and we need to get better at what we're doing. So,
well, I think a part of that too is right out the gate when you're talking to your customers and how you show yourself to your market, you need to be from a posture of, hey, we're good at what we do, sure, but anything can happen.
Totally.
But no matter what happens, where we've built a reputation is from when things go wrong. Yeah. Because when you do, I think we're into the thousands of projects in Prince George, over 3,000 projects. Yeah. When things go wrong, because just statistically, yes, when you do that much work, totally, And it might not even be your fault. It might be Mother Nature. It might be a design flaw. It could be 100 million things.
Yeah.
But we've built our reputation on when things go wrong.
Yeah.
We're going to be there.
Yeah.
We're not just here to replace your shingles. We're not here to just do your job.
Yeah.
But we're actually here to take care of your home, take care of your roof. We own it.
Yeah.
And we, on our estimates, we put a 10, 12, 15-year workmanship warranty. And we do that just for the sake of putting it on there. But
yeah.
Really, to us, when someone hires us to do their roof,
yeah,
like we own it. Like we own that job.
Totally.
That even though it's on their home,
yeah,
as long as that roof those shingles were put on by us or torch or metal or whatever it was,
yeah,
like that's ours. And that's a posture that you want to take. But in order to do that, you also have to you have to price that into your jobs too.
You have to price it in. You have to have the confidence that you're going to do it right. And also with that recognition that at times a mistake's going to get made somewhere. I mean, let's be honest, when we're running a contracting company of any sort, you're always like, it's extremely rare. And I've seen it happen, but it's very rare where you're not going to have at least some turnover in your staff. But for most of us, there's quite a bit of turnover. And in my case, I mean, a huge part of my career has been training young guys, not just training them in my trade, but training them in trades in general, like as the entry, kind of like the entry into the world of contracting. Because I love working with young guys. I just really get inspired by that. And I love the idea of mentorship. It's a big deal to me. B, I didn't have a work mentor when I was young, other than my initial boss okay, in fairness, that's not entirely true. When I was a kid, my dad was a teacher and a pastor, and in the summers, he loved to do some roofing, and then we would use that cash to go on holidays. That was kind of his approach. He grew up on a farm, so he wanted us boys to learn to work with our hands. So definitely don't let me underestimate the fact that my dad mentored me in the early days, 100%. Not in the trade so much as in working hard and also being clean and being polite. Like those things were massive. But as far as like becoming a businessman and a tradesman, those were beyond him. What we did was a hobbyish type of thing, which was very practical. We do a few really simple roofs and then go on holidays, and it worked great for the whole family. It was a wonderful thing. So there was some mentorship there. When I worked for Bob down in the Lower Mainland when I was 18, he also trained me, and he would have interestingly mentored me, and he would have probably given me his business had I chosen to go that route, because he was near retirement. He was 62 at the time I worked with him, and he was looking for someone to take over his company. It wasn't really a saleable company per se, but he would have given me all his contacts, etc. But funny enough, and talking about like humility versus pride, etc., I was too good for that, apparently. I just thought, well, no, I want to go and make my own way. Like I want to have my own start, which looking back is like pretty stupid. Like actually, because he had like a long-standing career of exactly the type of customer that I was looking for in a huge market. And so, yeah, actually I haven't really thought I'm not going to live in regret over that, but it was stupid. Let's just be honest. It was stupid. And I could have also received mentorship from him for a longer standpoint. And when I have young men now that ask me, at what point should I start my own company? My typical response is not as soon as you think you should.
Yeah.
Because had I worked with Bob for another 2-3 years, I would have made a lot more money and been able to set myself up with a decent cash flow when I did start, because my cash flow was exactly zero when I started my company. So like I had no reserves at all, like literally not. You don't buy a $200 truck unless you don't have more than $200. Like that's just how it is. But I do encourage young people. I'm like, if you want to start your own company, that's fine. That's a good aim to have, but spend a bit of time underneath someone that knows what they're doing. And even if they're not a mentor type person, you're still going to learn so much, and in a much less painful fashion if you're paying attention. But yeah, so I had this kind of like bravado that I can do this. And interestingly, I could do it, and I did it well on many fronts. But like Josh said, there's so many different things you've got to do as a business owner that some of the areas just absolutely kicked my butt year after year. And it has taken me, some real soul searching to figure out what those areas are over time. And I think we'll explore those over the podcast as we go forward.
Yeah,
and that's hopefully like we've made a lot of mistakes, and we continue, you know, like, and Josh said, like, there's certain areas that he's looking to push into with his company over the next while, and it's not going to go flawless. Like,
No, never does.
Some of those things will be painful, and we want to kind of give you guys a window seat to the process, both the mistakes we made in the past as well as decisions we're making currently that may not go according to plan. And so this is the journey we're hoping to go on, and we're really thankful that you guys are taking some time to listen and to be part of this dialogue. And our hope is that you're not shy to give comments and to, like, let us know where you see value in what we're talking about, and also where you think, hey guys, man, that rabbit trail just wasn't beneficial. Like, yeah, speak your mind. If you're not polite, we probably won't take you seriously, but that's okay. If you are, we want to take the dialogue seriously. We think that there is a need for contractors to have community, to have guys that they can rely on. And so while we might not know you personally, we want to be part of your journey and be part of the discussion. And hopefully when you hear us coming out of the speakers of your truck when you're having your lunch, you're going to feel like, you know, you're listening to friends. And
at the same time, when you're riding along with the journey with us and where we're going and where we're heading, if you have input on things we can do different too, we're all ears for that too. We're always down to get some good advice from those, because some of you out there have already done exactly what we're working towards through the multiple ventures we're working with too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
because this is a community thing. It's not just us here speaking to a mic, talking to you guys. This is an open conversation. We got where we are through our failures. And my vision is to go through this process that some of you can maybe skip some of the failures that we did and learn from ours directly, because we're very open to being vulnerable and open about the mistakes we've made.
Absolutely. And our intention is to bring on a bunch of different contractors that are in our world, and some that aren't in our world right now that we're going to get to know through this process, and to bring them onto our podcast, to interview them. And these guys are not going to be necessarily names that you know. They're not necessarily going to be guys that you're like, oh yeah, that's this guy. No, it's not like that. We might have the odd big name person on as we go along, and that would be great if that's possible. But our intention is to more regularly host contractors within our community and around the area that we live, and maybe even via distance we can do that now too, so possibly in other communities, and just talk about real stuff that they're going through, challenges that they either, we're going to highlight obviously the real deep lows and the real high highs, because those are the things that make the story, but also talk about just the grassroots daily grind of what we do and bring some insights. I think that one of the things as a young businessman that I was very aware of, but just didn't know how to tackle, was that a lot of the direction changes that I made in my company, I honestly felt like I just couldn't get a serious read on the success or failure of a direction change for like 5-6 months. Like, it often felt like I had to have like a breather from that change to be able to sit down with my books and my thoughts and like analyze that. And by that time, if I was off course, that's a long, a lot of effort going the wrong direction potentially. And so my hope is, and again, I say this recognizing that we are a voice, not the voice. And so we want to be a voice in a lot of contractors' lives. And my hope is that we can wrestle through some of these issues that you might be wrestling through and give some perspective as far as what worked for us, what didn't. And hopefully that can shorten that timeline, which I think, to your point, I don't think that we can necessarily stop people from learning the hard way, because I think that that's part of the entrepreneurial mindset. Like, there's a certain amount, it's like, yeah, didn't work for you, but I got this figured. And so I don't think we can stop that. But even if we can shorten the process or tighten the timeline a bit, that to me would be a huge win. So. Yeah. No, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And we're going to be back at you again very soon with some more content. And so, thanks a lot for taking some time.